Okay, my name is Brian Newcomb, and we're here again with my son, Benin. Yes. And what we're doing today is we're going to talk a little bit about the engine that we had in and the engine we're planning on putting in, his 1964 Dodge Dart. This is in relation to our ZF8 swap that we've posted a couple of videos on already, and we'd like to go ahead and talk a little bit about why we felt the ZF8 swap was necessary. This is a slant 6 that came out of an old Massey Ferguson combine. We basically did a stock build with this, upgraded the cam with a comp cam, and did put roller rockers on it. The block was decked to 100 thousandths, 50 over pistons. Everything else was just cleaned up. The head hasn't been ported or bowl blended or anything. We did use, I believe, 318 springs, but it's stock valve size, and then a roller cam. But other than that, it was a budget build for us to learn how to use the programming, because we put an MS3 Pro Evo with multi-port fuel injection and a 75 millimeter whole set turbo, which is like on the Cummins 5.9 diesel. We did that setup, and we decided we wanted to do somewhat of a budget build, stock build, to learn all of the electronics, learn all the programming and the tuning that we could get at the time. And what we found out was this engine pushed 10 pounds of boost on a very consistent basis, ran quite well. We drove it all summer, drove it hard. The car was very quick, surprisingly, with this setup. But what we did come into is some difficulties with our 904 transmission over here on the floor, with only having 3 speeds. We put a low first gear in it to help compensate for the boost lag, to somewhat get us out of the hole quicker, so to speak. That did help, but we noticed at highway speeds, the RPMs on the engine were just not sustainable. We would push somewhere around 2,800 RPMs at 55, 60 miles an hour. And it just seemed like, for an engine that taps out at 5,500, it just seemed like our RPMs were way too high, even though we had a 323 rear end posi in the back end. So all that being said, we knew we were going to be switching the engine. We just didn't know we were going to be switching the transmission. But we already had this engine in the works, and this engine over here is one that we have done quite a bit of work to. The heads have been ported and polished. The fuel bowls have been blended. The block has been O-ringed. We have a copper head gasket. We are running a competition cams cam. I believe it's 496 lift, intake, and exhaust.
273 duration as well.
And 273 duration at 50. We obviously still are running the same crank trigger ignition system like we had on the MS3 Pro Evo. We have a gill welding intake manifold that we're running Ford injectors with.
As well as a Ford throttle body for 70 millimeter. That's off of like a late 80s, early 90s 5.0 Mustang.
Yes.
Ours is made from BBK, so that works great there.
That has worked to be. It has been a really nice combination.
Yeah.
And then we're running Dutra duals with a custom stainless exhaust that we've built. The other aspects of this engine, I believe it's 30. This one's punched out 30 over. The deck height, I think it's about 21 thousandths in the hole. The deck was milled. The head was milled. But that's pretty much the story on this engine, other than we did do the block modifications that many people that know Slant 6's reference, the Slant 6 book by Doug Dutra. There were some block modifications with oiling in the system itself that we did do. We're going to see how those work, because oiling is the problem with this engine. I think eventually we're going to wind up going to some form of dry sump, just because the oiling system on this runs off the cam gear, and it's subpar. And they're known for shearing off the oil pump drive on the cam gear. And if you put a significant amount of money into a performance engine, you're running a real issue with regard to oiling, because our turbo needs, when it's under load, it needs at least 32 PSI to the turbo. And the oil is the weak point of this motor. There's some people out there working on some dry sumps. We haven't got there yet. I'm sure we will, because I'm already dissatisfied with the oiling on it. And but one project at a time. We just have to get this thing to work with a ZF8hp70 first. Then we'll get into the dry sump issues. This engine in of itself, we're using an Offenhauser valve cover that we've modified to use a PCV to work with the throttle body. I can't really think of anything else. We're really curious, though, to see how this one runs, since we do have some custom Ross pistons. We have K1 aluminum rods.
Flip it over and show that.
Okay. We have K1 aluminum rods, custom Ross pistons. This engine over here, we were just using a stock Silvalite cast piston, whereas this engine will have forged. Obviously, as anybody that's ever built engines, you realize you get money. The money's in the machine work. This engine is balanced. The crank was sent out. There's a guy in Northern Ohio that did the crank. Our local machine shop sent the crank out, and he did a wonderful job. But as you can see, we've got the ARP bolts. The fasteners come with the K1 rods. But the machine work, I can give you a little look down in the bottom here. The pistons were all custom made for setting the compression and the deck height. We should be right around 10 to 1, 9.5, 10 to 1. Some people think that's a lot for boost, but I don't know why the European engines and the Japanese engines can run high compression boost. So why can't this? If we're wrong, we're going to find out relatively quick, because we did have the block rung so that we could get beyond that 10 to 12 PSI boost range with a stock head gasket like we had over there.
Coupling this with a copper one.
And this one comes with it's a 50 thousandths Clark head gasket, I believe. And we're anticipating hopefully being able to run 20 to 25 PSI of boost. If we can't, it goes through the side of the block, we'll know where the limitations are. And that'll be the end of this one, and we'll have to tone it back down. But that's pretty well it for this engine.
There's also a crank scraper we're putting on this one. We got a windage tray, which we are not able to use with our ARP head studs.
The head studs aren't long enough to clear for the mounting points with the windage tray, so we're going to but I think that would also eliminate somewhat of the splash oiling that these engines require for the camshaft, so it's really not a bad thing, but I do like the idea of having a crank scraper.
Have that come in there.
So today the plan is to get the oil pan on, button the engine up, and then we're kind of at a holding pattern because we're waiting on a dust shield for the transmission. The oil pan has been modified and drilled.
We drilled that in for the turbo return line to come off the turbo, run there and dump back into the pan. There's not really a lot to go in there, just weld in bung.
And we got to paint up that shitty epoxy, because that looks horrible. But it was welded, but I'm not much of a welder, so we're going to go from there. But it won't leak. It leaked. The other one didn't leak.
You were low on gas. It was low on gas.
It was low on gas. That would be my excuse. That'll be my excuse. We can paint it. We can paint it. So other than that, that's where we are with this project. Once we get the dust shield, we're going to mate this up and use our JVX adapter for the LARB engines. We'll drill that out to fit our slant 6 crankshaft size. We've already got the pilot bushings. We'll probably do a video on the JVX adaptation to a slant 6, because there's been many of them I've seen with LA engines and RB engines. But to our knowledge, nobody has mated the ZF8hp to the slant 6 in this kind of matter, especially in an early A body. It's been a lot of challenges, and you just keep throwing money at it, but we're going to get there. So, all right, thank you very much for your time.